In 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte set out to conquer Russia with a massive army of over 600,000 troops. But despite his military genius, the campaign ended in disaster, leading to the loss of most of his men and the end of his empire. So, what went wrong? Napoleon's thinking was governed by cold logic. He was a master strategist and tactician who based his decisions on objective analysis rather than emotion. This made him incredibly effective in battle, but it also made him overconfident. He believed that he could defeat any army, no matter how large, and that he could conquer any nation, no matter how determined. For example, Napoleon famously said, "There is no such thing as luck. Fortune favors only the bold." And he believed that the only reason he had lost his previous battles was because his soldiers were not sufficiently courageous. In fact, he was so confident in his ability to win that he often took unnecessary risks. For example, at the Battle of Friedland in 1807, Napoleon gambled everything on a single charge, a massive all-or-nothing attack that could have easily failed. But instead of taking a more conservative approach, he threw caution to the wind and charged ahead. And when his troops hesitated, he personally led them forward, eventually breaking through the enemy lines and winning the battle. However, this same recklessness would later cost him dearly. In 1812, Napoleon decided to invade Russia despite the warnings of his advisors that the country was simply too big and too inhospitable. He believed that he could quickly capture Moscow and force the Russians to sue for peace. But he had severely underestimated the Russian people's determination to resist. The Russians had been preparing for war with France for years, and they were ready to fight. As Napoleon's army advanced into Russia, they faced constant harassment by Russian cavalry and artillery. And as the French struggled to make progress, their supplies began to dwindle. Instead of retreating, Napoleon pressed on, hoping to reach Moscow before his army starved. But by the time he finally reached the city, it was too late. The Russians had already evacuated, and the French were now trapped in a hostile city with no food or supplies. In the end, Napoleon was forced to retreat from Moscow, and as his army made their way back to France, they were decimated by cold, starvation, and disease. Of the 600,000 troops that had set out to conquer Russia, only a few thousand made it back alive. So while Napoleon Bonaparte may have been a master strategist and tactician, his cold logic ultimately led to his downfall. He was a brilliant general, but he was also a gambler and a risk-taker. And those traits would eventually lead him to lose his empire. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe and join us next time for more historical tales. Thank you for watching!